debt.
Dugovanja.
We'll go very quickly.
Proći ćemo brzo kroz to.
The Bible does not say that borrowing money is a sin.
Biblija nam ne govori da posuđivanje novca je greh.
But most of the times the Bible talks about debt, it's portrayed as something negative.
Ali uglavnom kada naiđemo na dug u Bibliji vidimo da je oslikan kao nešto
And I
negativno.
just remembered that I promised you a film.
I upravo sam se setio da sam vam obećao film.
So let's see it.
Hajde onda i da ga pogledamo.
It has subtitles in English.
Ima titlove na engleskom.
But it's basically the story of the widow and oil.
Ali u suštini to je ona priča o udovici i ulju.
I think it's in 2 Kings, probably. I'm not sure.
Pretpostavljamo u drugoj
2
carevima.
Kings 7, something like that.
7, čini mi se.
But the film just follows the Bible story.
Ali film, znači, sledi upravo tu priču iz Biblije. Dangerous. Lights are off.
We have come to collect your husband's debt.
Došli
We've
smo
waited long enough.
da uzmemo dug vašeg
Woman!
muža.
Answer me.
Dosta smo dugo čekali, odgovorite mi.
We have come for your husband's debt. Pay it.
All of it. Plati dug svoga muža, odmah sve. Ali moj muž je mrtav. Ja nemam ništa.
What are you doing? Please.
How old are you?
Koliko tebi godina? Ne.
They will do well in my fields.
Ti ćeš raditi u mom
Both of them.
Oboje.
3 days.
3 dana.
If you do not pay all of it, I'll take both your sons.
Ako ne otplatite ceo dug, uzet ću oba tvoja
I'll
sina.
be back soon.
I vraćam se uskoro.
Elisha.
Hello.
Your servant,
Tvoj sluga,
my husband,
moj muž,
is dead.
je umro.
You know he feared the Lord.
I ti znaš da se bojao Gospoda
among the prophets.
i da su ga poznavali među prorocima.
His creditors, they want to come and
Ali
take my
sada
children as
zajmodavci njegovi
slaves.
žele da uzmu moju decu
What do you
kao
have?
robove. Šta imaš ti?
What?
Molim?
What do you have in your house?
Šta imaš u svojoj kući?
I have nothing.
Nemam
What
ništa.
do you have?
Šta imaš?
Nothing.
Ništa. Osim
Except a little oil.
malo ulja.
Bring it to me.
Donesi mi to.
Go to your neighbors and get all
Idi
their
kod
empty
svojih
jars.
suseda, uzmi
Get
sve
as many
prazne
as you can
ćupove
carry and bring
i
it here.
sakupite koliko god možete i
Pour the
donesite
oil into
to.
the empty jars. When
Sipaj
each is
ulje u te
filled,
prazne posude
put it to the side.
i kada napuniš
all
jednu, stavi je
you
sa
can
strane
carry.
i nastavi da se napuniš sve.
I need another jar. Hurry.
Brzo.
Hurry, I need another jar.
Brzo još jedna posuda. Brzo još jednu posudu mi daj.
But there are no more.
Ali nemamo više posuda. Eliseju, uradili smo ono što si rekao. Idi prodaj ulje i otplati svoje dugove, a od ostalog ti i tvoji sinovi možete živjeti. Hvala. Hvala.
What do you think?
Šta mislite o tome?
Sorry? It's one of my favorite of the 6 films.
Ovo je bio jedan od mojih omiljenih od 6 filmova koji su...
And you can have lectures built around aspects of the film and the story.
I možemo čitava predavanja izgraditi na osnovu ove priče.
Did you notice the change in the woman's face from the beginning of the story to the end?
Da li ste primetili koliko se izraz lica na ženinog lica promenio s početka filma do kraja?
Having debt is not only a financial problem.
Imati dug nije samo financijski problem.
It affects the way you feel about life, the way you feel about yourself, your dignity.
Već to utiče i na vaše shvatanje života, uopšte na dostojanstvo, da, na lično dostojanstvo.
Debt is around the highest causes of suicide in general.
I dugovanja su najveći uzrok samoubistva.
So it's a serious problem when you have it in a society.
I to je veoma ozbiljan problem kada je prisutno u društvu.
And the film shows, and the story, it's based on the biblical story. There's nothing original about the film.
Priča sama po sebi jer je cela biblijska.
The story reminds us that you can have people end up in debt not because they've done something wrong, but because of objective circumstances.
Podsjeća nas na to da ljudi mogu da zapadnu u dugove ne zato što su oni nešto loše uradili, već zato što su ih takve okolnosti snašle.
In this case, her husband died.
U ovom slučaju njen muž je umro.
And we don't know if he was sick before that.
I ne znamo da li je bio bolestan pre toga.
But for some reason they incurred debt.
Ali iz nekog razloga on je umro.
And in a society like that, she can't really afford, what can she do to gain income?
I u tom društvu i u takvoj kulturi šta je ona mogla da radi da zaradi novac?
But interestingly, it's very interesting the way that God gives a solution.
Ali veoma interesantno, način je interesantan kako Bog daje rešenje.
Could Elisha just put his hand in the pocket and give her money that miraculously appeared in his pocket?
Zar Elisej nije mogao na čudesan način da izvuče neku sumu novca koja se čudom desila baš u njegovom džepu?
It wouldn't be a bigger miracle than having the oil not finish.
Ni to ne bi bilo ništa veće čudo nego ovo što se desilo, da ulje iz malog ćupa napuni sve.
But the solution God comes up with includes both her and the boys.
Ali rešenje koje je Bog osmislio obuhvata i nju i njene sinove.
They have to go and collect the jars.
Morali su prvo da odu i da sakupe što više ćupova.
Do you think these boys will ever forget this story?
Da li mislite da će ovi dečaci ikada zaboraviti ovu priču?
They were involved. They worked there.
Oni su bili uključeni u to. Oni su dali od sebe.
It's firmly printed into their minds now.
I to je zauvek ostalo urezano u njihovom sećanju.
And she was probably asked questions by her neighbors.
I verovatno su njoj komšije postavljale razna pitanja.
So, once she collects all the jars and then starts selling, there are all these questions, and she would have to tell the neighbors, this is what happened.
Sakupila je sve te ćupove, a kasnije dok je prodavala, sigurno je mogla da kaže svojim susedima, to i to se desilo.
And interestingly, God doesn't only solve her current problem,
I interesantno je da Bog ne samo da je rešio njen trenutni problem,
but actually helps her for the future as well.
Već se pobrinuo i za njenu budućnost.
Because he says, sell it.
Zato što je rekao, prodaj to.
So he actually involves her into business.
Znači ona je krenula se bavi poslom nekim.
She starts trading.
Počela je da trguje.
She's not a passive recipient of help.
Ona nije samo neki pasivni primalac pomoći.
She's part of the solution herself.
Već je i ona sama postala deo rešenja.
And we could have several of the books that I brought from the US on that trip.
I mogli bismo nekoliko tih knjiga koje sam malo pre pomenuo, koje sam doneo iz Amerike.
The books are actually good books and important.
I knjige su zaista jako dobre i važne.
Several of them are based on research done from Africa in the past decades.
Tih knjiga govori o istraživanjima u Africi koje su se obavljala u poslednjih nekoliko
decenija. Showing that actually sending help to Africans makes the situation worse.
koje govore o tome da sama pomoć koja se neprekidno šalja u Afriku čini situaciju još gorom.
Because it makes people passive.
Zato što ljudi postaju pasivni.
Instead of helping them to creatively use their talents to work and provide for their families,
Umesto da im pomognu da na kreativan način koriste svoje talente pa da rade i da se pobrinu za sebe i svoju porodicu,
it's actually easier for them to just sit and do nothing.
Za njih je postalo lakše da sede i da ne rade ništa,
Because that's when they get help from other countries.
jer tek tada će dobiti pomoć iz neke druge zemlje.
Basically keeps them from showing initiative.
I na taj način oni su ih u stvari onesposobili da oni pokažu neku svoju inicijativu.
And if you're just sitting and doing nothing for your life,
A ako samo sediš i ništa ne radiš da bi doprineo svom životu,
if the husband is not the one who's providing for the family,
ako muž nije taj koji se brine za svoju porodicu,
but the United Nations or, some other organization,
već Ujedinjene nacije ili neka druga organizacija,
that takes away from the dignity of the husband.
onda to umanjuje, to dostojanstvo muža.
He's doing nothing for the family.
Znači, on ne radi ništa za
And
porodicu.
that's why you end up with husbands in Africa being totally irresponsible.
I zato ima toliko puno muževa u Africi koji su potpuno neodgovorni.
Because someone else is taking their responsibility.
Jer neko drugi je preuzeo njihovu odgovornost.
And all of these studies, and there are many books written on the topic,
I sva ta proučavanja i mnoge knjige su napisane na tu temu.
are showing how instead of helping Africa, the Western world is actually putting Africa in a worse position than before.
Pokazuju kako umjesto da pomognu Africi, zapadni svet je samo još više stavio Afriku.
And by the way,
u
there are
težak
selfish
položaj.
reasons for that on behalf of the West.
Naravno, iza toga stoje i neki sebični razlozi, što se
But that story shows you a little bit of a glimpse of that dynamic.
Ali ova priča nam je pokazala barem mali uvid u tu dinamiku.
Better than just going and giving a coin to somebody who is in need.
Mnogo bolje od toga da odemo i da damo novčić nekome koji je u potrebi.
Give them a chance to do some work and win or get that money as
Bilo
income.
bi da im pružimo priliku da oni urade neki posao i da sami zarade svoju
And
platu.
then they will feel that they have dignity. They will be proud of what they do.
I tada će oni osjećati kako imaju dostojanstvo i moći će da se ponose svojim radom.
So when we have someone that's experiencing debt,
Kada imamo ili naiđemo na nekoga ko je zapao u
the
dugove,
financial problem is only the surface.
financijski problem je samo na površini, ono što se
There is a
vidi.
lot more going on there.
Ali mnogo više toga se dešava.
And
u
if you
pozadini.
only treat the surface,
I ako samo se postaramo za to što je na površini,
you're not going to help.
nećete pomoći na taj način.
Did I mention today, a woman came to us last year in Bulgaria
Jedna žena nam je došla prošle godine u Bugarskoj
with 50,000 euro debt.
i imala je dug od 50.000 evra.
Did I mention that today?
Sam to
No.
spomenuo danas? Nisam.
It was tomorrow. It was yesterday, right. I'm beginning to get confused. This woman had 50,000 euro debt.
Znači, ta žena je imala dug od 50.000
She
evra.
had 2 shops for second-hand clothes. That was her business.
Dve radnje kojim, znači njen posao je bio odeća second hand.
One of the
korištena
shops
odeća.
never made any profit.
Jedna od radnji nikada ništa nije
So for
zarađivala.
about 2 years she was putting money into it, hoping that it will eventually start turning.
Tako da 2
some
godine
profit.
ona je samo ulagala novac u tu radnju, a nije zaradila
And several
ništa.
months before she came to us, she'd finally closed it.
I nekoliko meseci pre nego što je došla kod nas, ona je konačno
The
zatvorila.
second shop was a good location, good one,
Druga radnja je bila na dobroj lokaciji, dobro je radila.
but because of all the money she was losing with the other one, she didn't have enough money to invest into new clothes. So it was giving some profit, but not enough.
Ali zbog svog onog novca koje je ulagala u onu drugu radnju, onda nije imala dovoljno novca da nabavlja novu odeću, tako da iako je malo zarađivala, nije bilo dovoljno.
And the biggest part of these 50,000 euro debt was owed to the bank. It was a mortgage for an apartment she bought.
I najveći deo ovog duga od 50.000 evra je zapravo bilo dugovanje banci, zato što je uzela kredit
But there was
za
also
stan.
10,000 euros that were owed to private creditors,
Ali takođe je bilo i 10.000 evra
money
duga
lenders.
ko je zajmodavcima ili ovim zelenašima dugovao.
And one of them had 5% monthly interest.
A jedan od njih je imao 5% mesečne kamate.
That's 60% annual.
A to je 60% godišnje kamate na iznos.
So in a year, she would owe more than a half more than what she owes.
A tako da je za godinu dana ona dugovala više od polovine od onoga što je dugovala.
And when she came to talk to us, she was absolutely hopeless. I mean, she had tried borrowing money from every possible person, organization, and so on. And there was no one else who was willing to give her.
I kada je došla da se obrati nama, ona je već bila skroz u beznadežnoj situaciji, već je pitala sve koje je znala i sve organizacije za zajam.
And I told her, you know, I have some friends who are wealthy, but I don't think anyone would give you. It's a black hole.
Ja sam joj rekao, ja imam neke prijatelje koji jesu imućni, ali opet ne verujem da će ti iko toliki novac pozajmiti, jer to je crna rupa.
If they give you an amount of money, you know, it will disappear in just a few months.
Ako ti daju neku količinu novca, ona će jednostavno nestati za par meseci.
Let's look at the details.
Hajde da bolje se pozabavimo detaljima.
And it's funny, the first thing you do when you have someone in debt, or if you're in debt yourself.
Interesantno je da prva stvar koju učinite ako naiđete na nekog ko ima dug ili ako se vi sami nađete u dugu,
you first have to see what is the situation.
Prva stvar koju treba da uradite je da vidite kakva je situacija, kako stoje stvari.
I'm skipping, we don't need to talk about that. Yeah, list your debts and list all you have.
Znači, navedete sve svoje dugove, odnosno iznos dugovanja i sve ono što imate, što posjedujete.
And with this woman, what we found out is basically she had nothing.
I što smo saznali kod ove žene, da u suštini nije posjedovala ništa.
She had a business, but that business wasn't really making a lot of money.
Imala je svoj biznis, ali on nije mnogo zarađivao.
Eventually, we managed to sell the business to a friend of hers, so she got 2,000 euro for the business.
I na kraju smo uspeli da prodamo tu njenu prodavnicu prijatelju njenom i izvukla je 2.000 evra iz toga.
It wasn't an ideal situation because we didn't realize that at the time, but it turned out that the only condition to sell the business was for the lady's daughter to become co-partner in the business.
Nismo shvatili to u tom trenutku, ali jedini uslov za prodaju prodavnice je bilo da ćerka te žene postane partner.
And it turned out that the woman who bought the business and paid the 4,000 euro hadn't consulted her husband.
A žena koja je kupila njen biznis i koja je platila 4.000 evra, pre toga se nije posavetovala sa svojim mužem.
And he was, one of these shady types.
A on je bio jedan od onih sumnjivih tipova.
Not exactly mafia, but
ne baš mafijaš.
You don't know exactly what he's doing.
Ali niko ne zna baš tačno šta radi.
And he's not a Christian. She was a Christian. Her
on
husband
nije
is not.
hrišćanin, ona je bila hrišćanka, ali njen muž ne.
So 2 months later she said, my husband does not allow, he does not approve, I want to get out of the business.
I nakon 2 meseca ona je došla i rekla, moj muž ovo ne odobrava i moram da izađem iz ovog biznisa.
So very complicated situation. Anyway,
we
managed to sort it out, so at least she was free from the business wasn't taking any more money.
Ali uspeli smo nekako da završimo i to i oslobodila se tog posla i nije više izvlačio taj posao novac od nje i uspjela je čak i nešto keša da zaradi.
And with that cash she managed to pay the most immediate bills.
I sa tim kešom je mogla da plati najvažnije račune.
The apartment she has was mortgaged.
Taj stan u kome je živela bio je pod hipotekom.
And she was still paying the interest.
I još uvijek je otplaćivala kamatu.
So the bank could, if she didn't pay 2 monthly bills, the bank could take the apartment. And she would have nothing.
Ako ne plati 2 mesečne rate, banka može da joj konfiskuje stan i onda ne bi imala ništa.
She had an old car.
Imala jedan stari auto.
Which was worth about 1,000 euro.
Koji možda je vredeo 1.000 evra.
And that was everything she had.
I to je bilo sve što je posjedovala.
How do you start paying 50,000 euro debt with nothing?
Gde početi onda sa otplatom duga od 50.000 evra kada nemaš ništa?
And one of the first things we started, when we saw what the situation was, and it took us about a month and a half to just find out what the situation is.
Kada smo videli kako stoje stvari, a bilo nam je potrebno mesec i po dana samo da vidimo kako izgleda situacija, da sagledamo.
Oftentimes people in a situation like that, they forget things, they're psychologically not able to figure it out.
Često ljudi u takvoj situaciji uopšte ne mogu psihološki da se nose sa time i zaboravljaju stvari.
If you have a person in debt in your church or in your family,
ako imate neku osobu
it's not enough to send them to a seminar
je u dugovima, u crkvi ili u porodici, nije dovoljno da ih pošaljete na neki seminar ili da im date knjigu da pročitaju.
It won't do any good.
To im neće ništa koristiti.
If they're really under pressure, they're probably unable to figure out things alone.
Ako su stvarno pod pritiskom, oni neće moći sami da dođu do zaključka.
And that's why we're trying to train coaches, people that can go alongside someone in need and help them with the process.
I zato mi obučavamo ljude koji će kasnije moći da budu rame uz rame sa tim ljudima i da im pomognu kroz taj proces.
This lady was taking antidepressants.
Ova žena je počela da pije tablete protiv depresije.
She was physically not able to do any work. She was trembling like that, all because of the stress.
Fizički nije bila sposobna uopšte ni za kakav posao, bila je pod tolikim stresom.
So finally, after figuring out what the situation was,
kada smo na kraju konačno sagledali kako stoje stvari,
we said, okay, let's look at step by step how can we try to get out of the situation.
Rekli smo, dobro, hajde da vidimo korak po korak kako da izađeš iz te situacije.
First, we tried to get rid of all the expenses that we didn't want to have.
Pre svega smo se otarasili svih troškova koji su bili suvišni.
So we sold the business.
Znači, prodali smo njen biznis.
We asked her to move out of her apartment and move to live with her daughter.
Zamolili smo je da se iseli iz svog stana i da pređe da živi sa ćerkom.
And you know, very interesting thing.
Interesantna stvar se desila.
The mother was the business lady.
Majka je bila ta poslovna žena.
But it turned out that the daughter had a very clear mind about money.
Ali ispostavilo se da ćerka je imala veoma bistar um po pitanju novca.
Very reasonable.
Veoma razumna.
For some reason though, the mother was a very strong woman.
Ali iz nekog razloga majka je bila veoma
very independent.
Snažna, nezavisna žena.
And she had convinced her daughter to even join her. The daughter had taken a loan to help her at one point.
I ubedila je čak i svoju ćerku da joj se pridruži i ćerka je uzela neki zajam da bi pomogla majci.
Even though the daughter realized that it probably wasn't a wise decision to do.
Iako je i ćerka shvatila da to i nije baš bio najmudriji potez.
And anyway, we asked her to move with her daughter so that she could, cut on expenses.
Ali zatražili smo od nje da se preseli kod ćerke, da sve te ekstra troškove...
And we started looking for someone who would be willing to buy the apartment, even though it's mortgaged.
I počeli smo da tražimo nekoga ko bi bio voljan da kupi taj stan, iako se nalazio pod hipotekom.
So a very complicated contract.
To je bio veoma komplikovan ugovor.
To take the apartment, give her some cash.
Da se oni slože sa time da kupe taj stan i da joj daju nešto cash novca.
Very cheaply. Very, very cheaply. Much below the market value.
Mnogo ispod cene tržišta.
With the agreement that she would be paying the monthly fees to the bank.
Sa dogovorom da ona otplaćuje mesečne rate banci.
And when the mortgage is paid, the apartment will belong to this other person.
I kada otplati hipoteku, da onda taj stan pripada ovoj drugoj osobi.
To be honest, I thought that would be impossible. I mean, no one would be crazy enough to do that.
I iskreno, ja sam odmah rekao, samo luda osoba možda pristane na ovakav ugovor.
And you know, that's where the miracle happened.
Ali tada se dešavaju čuda.
I mean, literally, it was God doing it.
Bukvalno je se jasno videlo da je Bog bio.
From somewhere, a cousin of the lady turned out.
Od nekud se pojavio neki rođak te žene.
Who had the money.
Koji je imao novac.
And he bought the apartment.
I on je kupio stan.
I mean, and this is a miracle.
I to zaista jeste čudo.
Exactly when she needed it.
Da baš u tom trenutku kad je trebalo.
Because they're relatives, he knows her, he could trust her.
Pošto su rođaci, on je poznaje, mogao je da joj veruje.
Because otherwise it's a huge risk.
Jer u suprotnom to je ogroman rizik.
But he gave her cash.
Ali on joj je dao cash.
And we used that cash to pay one of the private money lenders.
A i onda smo iskoristili taj cash novac da otplati jednog od zelenaša.
And then we sold the car and did a few other small things, and we managed to basically pay all the private lenders.
I onda smo prodali njen auto i u suštini smo uspeli da otplatimo sve te zajmodavce.
But, you know, she still has to pay the mortgage.
Ali opet je ostao taj dug hipoteke, morala je da otplaćuje hipoteku.
And we looked at various options and realized that there is nothing that she can work in Bulgaria that would give her enough income to be able to repay.
Tražili smo razne opcije i zaista nije postojao ni jedan posao u Bugarskoj koji je ona mogla da radi, koji bi joj plaćao dovoljnu svotu novca da bi mogla da otplati taj dug.
So we said, you know, you need to go abroad.
Pa smo joj rekli, morat ćeš da ideš u inostranstvo.
You know, there are a lot of Bulgarian women who work in Austria and Germany, take care of old people.
Postoji puno žena iz Bugarske koje odlaze u inostranstvo, Austriju ili neka mesta gde se brinu za starije.
And the income they get is between 500 and 1,000 euro.
I plate koje dobijaju za to je od 500 do 1000 evra.
Which is a lot more than that lady could ever get in Bulgaria.
Što je mnogo više nego što bi ta žena ikada zaradila u Bugarskoj.
She didn't know any language though.
Međutim, ona nije znala ni jedan drugi jezik.
Besides Bulgarian.
Osim bugarskog.
So initially she said, oh, it's impossible. When the miracle with that cousin happened, that encouraged her.
I u početku ona je rekla, ne, to je nemoguće, ali kada se desilo ono čudo sa njenim rođakom, onda je to ohrabrilo.
And so she took a month-long course in German.
Pa je otišla na jedan kurs mesec dana da nauči nemački.
You can imagine how much German she learned.
Možete da zamislite koliko nemačkog je naučila za tih
But
javnih
somehow
mesec dana.
she managed to get a job in Austria.
Ali nekako je uspela da se zaposli u Austriji.
And today she's living in Austria.
I danas ona i dalje živi u Austriji.
The first job wasn't a very good one. There were problems with the person.
Prvi posao nije bio baš najbolji, imala je nekih problema sa poslodavcem.
But now I heard that she's got a very good job. She's in a beautiful Austrian town, you know, with many flowers and beautiful houses.
Da je jako dobar posao ima u jednom prelepom austrijskom gradu, pun cveća, lepo mesto.
And if you see pictures from 1 year ago and pictures from her now, it's like two different people.
I ako vidite njenu fotografiju od pre godinu dana i danas, to su dve različite osobe potpuno.
But you know, part of the problems that led there.
Ali deo problema koji su doveli do te situacije.
Because we dealt with the finances. Okay, we made all these decisions.
Jer mi smo se postarali za finansijsku stranu, doneli smo sve te odluke.
And I helped only a little. The biggest part of the job was done by a friend of mine who's an economist. He's an expert in finances.
Ja sam malo pripomogao u toj situaciji. Najveći deo je pomogao moj prijatelj koji se bavi ekonomijom.
But also God literally did a miracle finding someone who's willing to buy the apartment.
I naravno Bog je bukvalno učinio čudo što je doveo tu osobu koja je bila spremna da kupi stan.
But during the process of solving the financial mess.
Ali tokom tog procesa rešavanja tog finansijskog haosa,
what I did is I started asking her questions, you know, tell me about your background. Why did you make this decision? Why did you do this?
Ja sam joj postavljao razna pitanja. Govori mi nešto o sebi, svoje prošlosti. Zašto si uradila to? Zašto ovo?
And found out that this lady, her father died when she was a very young child.
Saznao sam da je njen otac umro dok je bila jako mala.
And she decided that she would never allow herself to be in a situation where she's dependent on somebody.
I ona je tada donela odluku da nikada neće dopustiti u svom životu da zavisi od nekog drugog.
She became very independent.
Postala je veoma nezavisna.
Now, later in life she married, her husband left her.
Kasnije u životu se udala, ali muž je ostavio.
So that enforced her conviction even more.
Tako da je time postala još ubeđenija u svoju odluku da ne zavisi ni od koga.
So when she lost her job many years ago,
pa kada je pre više godina izgubila posao,
her desire to be independent led her to start a business.
Njena želja da se osamostali dovela je do toga da ona započne svoj posao.
Because then she could be her own boss.
Jer tada konačno će moći da bude sama svoj šef. I neće morati da zavisi ni od koga.
Truth is, she doesn't have the gift for business.
Ali istina je da ona nije imala dara za poslovanje.
You know, if she had, she would realize that this business is not a good one.
Jer da je imala, shvatila bi da taj posao i nije baš bio najbolji.
You can't make a lot of profit that way.
Ne možeš baš mnogo novca da zaradiš na taj način.
Not in her city, not in the circumstances in which she was doing the business.
Bar ne u njenom gradu i ne pod okolnostima u
kojima
kojima je ona radila.
There are people that make a lot of money selling second-hand clothes. but there is a way to do it.
Postoje ljudi koji dosta zarađuju na toj second hand odeći, ali postoji određen način kako to treba
And she
raditi.
hadn't figured it out. And basically, it was very obvious. She doesn't have the mind of a businessman.
A ona to nije shvatila i u suštini ona nije imala taj poslovne žene.
But she continued for years to borrow money and put it into a business that's really not making money because she wanted to be independent.
I godinama je nastavljala da pozajmljuje novac i ulaže ga u taj posao koji je samo jeo novac, samo zato što je želela da bude samostalna.
And at one point I told her, do you see now why God has allowed you to come to this position?
I u jednom trenutku sam joj rekao, da li vidiš sada zašto ti je Bog dopustio da završiš pod ovakvim okolnostima?
Because for years you've been trying to prove to yourself that you can make it alone.
Jer godinama si pokušavala sama sebi da dokažeš da možeš sama da...
With no help from outside.
Bez ikakve pomoći s polja od nekog drugog.
You don't have to do that.
I to ne moraš da radiš.
You have dignity as the person who you are.
Imaš dostojanstvo upravo onako kakva jesi.
You don't have to prove anything to God.
Ne moraš ništa Bogu da dokazuješ.
You have to be real.
Samo treba da budeš realan.
And God has allowed you to come to this position so that He can show you that He's the only one who can take care of you.
I Bog je dopustio da dođeš do ove tačke da ti dokaže da je on jedini koji može da se brine za tebe.
And we had this conversation before we even had a solution. We didn't know what was going to happen.
I razgovarali smo o svemu ovome pre nego što smo i došli do rešenja, pre nego što smo znali kako će sve da se razreši.
And so oftentimes when you find someone who's in debt, there is the financial decisions that led to there.
I zato veoma često kada naiđemo na nekoga ko duguje i ko se nalazi u dugovanjima,
but there is the personal, spiritual decisions that lie behind those.
Postoje okolnosti koje su dovele do toga, ali postoji i duhovna strana koja ih je dovela do toga.
And if you don't deal with those,
I ako se ne pozabavimo i sa time,
you will help them on the surface level,
pomoći ćete im samo na onoj površini,
and several years later they will do the same mistake.
Ali nekoliko godina kasnije
Because the
sigurno će
real
napraviti istu
reason, the
grešku.
real motivator hasn't been dealt with.
Zato što pravi razlog i pravi uzrok svega toga nisu razrešeni.
And what God is doing with this woman is exactly that now.
I ono što Bog radi sa ovom ženom sada, to je upravo
He's
to.
proving to herself in very practical ways that He can take care of herself and every need.
On joj dokazuje na veoma praktičan način da on može da se pobrine za nju u svakoj
And
potrebi
she
i
can
oblasti.
relax
I ona može da se opusti
and enjoy life.
i da uživa u životu.
Not trying to be constantly in control.
A ne da pokušava neprekidno da ona ima svu kontrolu u svojim rukama.
Let's take a break.
Hajmo na kratku pauzu.
I told you the story about this woman
Ispričala sam ovu priču o ženi, ovoj,
because it's a much better way to illustrate these points than just telling you the points.
zato što je to bio mnogo bolji način da ilustrujem ove tačke nego da vam samo kažem koje su tačke.
But 7 steps to get out of debt.
Ali 7 koraka kako izaći iz dugovanja.
Pray.
Prvi je moliti se.
And God is the only one who can solve your problems.
Bog je jedini koji može da reši vaše probleme.
The second one is stop accumulating more debt.
Drugi korak je prestanite da pravite nove dugove.
There is a lot more that can be said here, but basically, don't borrow money to repay borrowed money.
Mnogo stvari možemo reći ovde, ali glavna stvar je nemojte pozajmljivati novac da biste otplatili pozajmljeni novac.
There are exceptions to this rule.
Mada postoje izuzeci za ovo pravilo.
But you have to know what you're doing.
Ali tada morate tačno znati šta radite.
And basically if you've ended up with big debt, you don't know what you're doing.
Jer na kraju ako završite sa ogromnim dugom, onda niste znali šta radite.
If you have a friend who's very good with finances,
ako imate nekog prijatelja koji je jako dobar sa
and whom you can really trust,
i kome stvarno možete da verujete,
that they will be advising you to the best of your interest,
da će vas oni savjetovati na najbolji mogući način,
and not just throwing you, empty advice.
A ne samo da vam gomilaju prazne savjete.
Then there are some cases in which you actually can what's called loan consolidation. Consolidate several loans in a way that you change the monthly payment so that you can actually start paying it. But it's a complicated process. You have to know what you're doing.
A postoji, znači, neki način koji je jako komplikovan i naziva se konsolidacija dugova, znači da tako uskladite svoje dugove da na kraju smanjite mesečnu ratu koje treba da otplatite duga, ali to je jako komplikovano.
So it's possible, but you have to know what you're doing.
Znači, moguće je, ali stvarno morate tada da znate šta radite.
Then you list all your debts and everything you own. You saw that in the illustration.
Pravite spisak svojih dugova i svega onog što posjedujete, to ste vidjeli u ilustraciji.
And decide whether you should sell any possessions to reduce the debt.
I onda donosite odluku da li postoji nešto što treba da prodate da biste smanjili svoj dug.
Do you remember in the film, the first words of Elisha were, what do you have?
Sećate se, prve reči Eliseja u ovom filmu bile su šta imaš.
When one's in debt, we often think, I've got nothing.
Kada je neko u dugovima, često kaže, pa nemam ništa.
If you didn't have anything, you would be dead by now.
Da nemaš stvarno ništa, bio bi mrtav.
If you're still alive, if you have roof above your head,
ako si još živ i imaš krov nad glavom,
you probably have something.
Sigurno imaš nešto.
So, like in the case with this woman, we sold the business.
Kao u slučaju ove žene, prodali smo njen biznis.
We even sold an apartment that wasn't hers.
Čak smo i prodali stan koji nije ni bio njen.
A lot of things are possible.
I mnoge stvari jesu moguće.
And when you owe money, that's the crucial thing. The debt is the first thing you have to deal with.
I kada dugujete novac, znači to je prva stvar. Dug je prva stvar koja treba da se otarasi.
No romantic feelings.
Nema nikakvih romantičnih osjećanja prema televizoru.
We saved so much, I'm not giving it away.
Toliko smo štedili za ovaj televizor, nema šanse da ga prodam.
What is more precious to you? Your freedom?
Šta ti je dragocenije? Tvoja sloboda?
Being free from debt?
Da budeš oslobođen od
dugova? Being able to make your own decisions?
Da možeš da sam donosiš svoje odluke?
Or holding on to some kind of possession?
Ili da se držiš za neki komad imovine?
Use a budget to control your spending.
Pravite budžet da biste mogli da kontrolišete svoje trošenje.
Very often people that are in debt, they're not able to rationally make decisions.
Veoma često ljudi koji su u dugovima ne mogu racionalno da donose odluke.
And they actually spend money that they desperately need to pay their debt back for things they don't really need.
I oni troše novac koji im je očajnički potreban da otplate svoje dugove na stvari koje im u stvari nisu potrebne.
So you really need a surgeon in such cases.
A surgeon?
Surgeon.
Hirurg. Okay. Znači, stvarno vam je potreban hirurg u tim situacijama.
Someone who can objectively analyze the situation and say, this goes, this goes, this goes.
Neko ko na objektivan način može da sagleda situaciju, da kaže ovo treba da odsečemo, ovo odlazi, ovo odlazi.
And then establish a repayment plan.
I onda treba da se osmisli neki plan otplaćivanja duga.
I want to show you one.
Želim da vam pokažem jedan takav plan.
For example, this is what we call the snowball effect.
Ovo je ono što nazivamo efektom grudve.
So you have here listed various debts, loans.
Ovde imate navedene razne dugove, odnosno zajmove.
And you have here the amount, the whole amount.
I ovde imate čitav iznos svih tih zajmova.
Here you have the interest.
Ovde imate kamate.
So you see the biggest one is this one, 19.
Ovde vidimo da je najveći 19%.
And then this is the minimum amount you need to pay on that debt every month.
I ovo je minimalni iznos koji morate svakog meseca otplaćivati svim ovim stavkama.
Then you have here a graph that's called extra. If you can pay more.
A ovde ima kolona koja govori ako možete više da otplatite, to će biti još bolje.
This is after 3 months, after 6 months, and so on.
I onda vidimo šta će se desiti nakon 3 meseca, nakon 6, 15.
The snowball effect, simply put.
I taj efekat grudve, jednostavno rečeno.
We usually recommend start paying out the debt with the highest interest rate.
Ono što najpre savjetujemo jeste da se otplati dug koji ima najveću kamatnu stopu.
So start with the 19 here.
Znači ovo sa 19%.
Why? Because this is where you're losing most money.
Zašto? Zato što upravo tu gubimo najviše novca.
And that's what we did with this lady.
I to je ono što smo uradili s ovom
The
ženom.
first debt we paid was the private money lenders.
Prvi dug koji smo otplatili je bio onim zelenašima.
Because every month that she had this debt, she lost more and more money with them.
Jer svakog meseca koliko je njima duže otplaćivala, više i više novca je
Actually,
gubila.
this chart shows that Crown recommends you start with the smallest debt first.
I Crown Ministry uvek savjetuje da počnemo sa najmanjim dugom.
And their idea is so that when you repay it, you get encouraged and you're motivated to continue.
I ideja iza toga jeste da kada uspete da otplatite taj najmanji dug, onda se ohrabrite da otplatite i ove ostale.
If you're more of an impulsive person, more emotional, that may be a good idea for you.
I ako ste impulsivnija osoba, emotivna, onda ćete verovatno vi se opredeliti za to.
But if you're a more reasonable person, you go for the highest
Ali
interest
ako
rate.
ste razumnija osoba, onda ćete ići za
From a
ovu
financial
opciju
point of view, that makes the most sense.
koja najveću kamatnu stopu ima i to sa financijske tačke gledišta
And
ima
the
više
snowball
logike.
effect is that as soon as you pay this debt,
I taj efekat grudve kaže da čim otplatite taj dug,
what do you do with this amount
šta radite onda
that you don't have to pay anymore?
sa tom sumom novca koju ne morate više da dajete da biste otplatili taj dug?
You buy a new phone.
Kupite novi telefon.
Right, you're right, absolutely.
Upravo si, da.
You put it on top of the payments of another debt.
Otplaćujemo, znači sa tim neki drugi dug.
So this is the extra money. You see?
I to je
This
taj
debt
ekstra novac.
is paid.
Ovaj dug je otplaćen,
So the extra money goes here.
znači taj viška novac ide na ove ostale dugove.
And so next month we actually pay a lot more.
I onda sledećeg meseca možemo više
And
novca da odvojimo.
so it works like a snowball.
I na taj način
That's the
funkcioniše
idea.
kao
But
grudva
of course
koja
it looks
postaje
very
sve
easy on paper and on screen. It's not easy to do in
I
practice.
sve to naravno izgleda mnogo lakše na papiru ili ovde na platnu, odnosno na zidu.
But if you
nego
don't
u
actually
stvarnosti.
write things in some way and see how it works,
Ako,
you're bound to make mistakes.
ipak ako ne zapišete te stvari, kako stvari treba da funkcionišu, onda ćete sigurno napraviti kad tad neku grešku.
Like with this lady, we had 2 months later, oh, by the way, I just remembered, I also owe money to this person.
Kao sa ovom ženom je bilo, posle 2 meseca, odjednom se setila, o da, pa ja dugujem novac i ovoj osobi.
And that's why the collection of information is very important in the first place.
I zato je pre svega važno napraviti taj spisak informacija.
So establish a repayment plan.
Znači, osmisliti plan za otplatu duga
Consider earning additional income.
i razmotriti mogućnost da se na još neki način zaradi novac.
With this lady, we realized, there is absolutely no possibility that if you stay in Bulgaria, you will get enough income to pay your debt.
Sa ovom ženom smo definitivno shvatili da ne postoji nikakva šansa da ona zaradi dovoljno novca u Bugarskoj da bi otplatila svoj dug.
So you need to go somewhere where you can.
I zato je morala da ode negde gde je mogla to da učini.
And reduce spending.
I naravno treba smanjiti sve troškove,
some
odnosno
things,
trošenje novca.
when you're in a critical situation and when you're in a situation of debt, that's a crisis.
Kada se nalazite u dugovima, to je kriza.
In
znači,
such a
nalazite se u
situation,
krizi.
you stop buying some things that you used to buy.
I u kriznim situacijama prestajete da kupujete neke stvari koje ste ranije kupovali.
We don't have time, but I've got a 4-minute clip that I could show you of a US family.
Nemamo vremena, ali imam jedan klip od 4 minuta
And that's
koji
a real
pokazuje
story. It was shown on CNN.
porodicu, istinita priča, prikazali su je na CNN-u.
And 2 years ago, my boss from Crown, the top boss, actually invited that family to a meeting, and we met them face to face.
I pre 2 godine naš glavni direktor Crowna je pozvao tu porodicu da ih upoznali smo.
In about 16 years, they accumulated $128,000 of debt.
Za 16 godina oni su akumulirali $128,000 duga.
And they managed to pay them in 5 years.
I uspeli su da otplate sav dug za 5 godina.
But you will be amazed to see, you know, what they do.
Ali bili biste zaprepašteni da vidite šta su oni sve
Very
radili.
interesting when they showed it on CNN, and I've got the CNN clip.
I vrlo interesantno kada su prikazali na CNN-u.
My boss was watching this clip
Moj šef je gledao taj klip.
and said, there is no way these people are not Christians.
I
They must
rekao
be
je,
Christians.
nema šanse da ovi ljudi nisu hrišćani, mora da
And
jesu hrišćani.
he found ways to contact the TV to get the information. Sure enough, they turned out to be a Christian family.
I uspeo je nekako da dođe do informacija preko televizije i svih izvora i naravno ispostavilo se da jesu
And when we
hrišćani.
met with them, they said, you know, we didn't really say it on TV, but I mean, God is the only one who made it possible.
I kada smo ih upoznali lično, oni su rekli da, nismo to rekli na televiziji, ali zaista Bog je jedini koji je ovo omogućio da...
But they stopped eating outside. You know, in America, people go to restaurants. No restaurants for them.
U Americi je jako popularno, svi jedu napolje, po restoranima, za njih više toga nije bilo.
Started buying cheap food.
Počeli su da kupuju jeftinu hranu.
Not the special brands, but the cheapest possible.
Ne one posebne marke, već ono
Does Temple
najjeftinije.
have their own brand?
Sorry, Tempo.
Temple. You have a store named Temple.
uh-huh.
Do they have their own?
Da li Tempo ima
Food,
svoju, ima on svoju...
That's usually the
I
cheapest.
to je obično najjeftinije od sve robe.
Well, that's what they started to buy.
To su i oni počeli da kupuju.
You know, they ate meat from time to time, but not every day.
Jeli su meso s vremena na vreme, ali ne
Changed the
svaki
kind
dan.
of food they ate.
Promenili su način ishrane.
The husband got a second job.
Muž je našao drugi posao.
And because he wanted to save on petrol,
A pošto je želeo da uštedi na benzinu,
during the day he was working in a pharmacy.
preko dana on je radio u apoteci jednoj,
At night he worked as a janitor, as a cleaner in one place.
a noću je radio kao čistač.
And in order to save on petrol from going back from the night job to home and then back to his work, he actually slept in his car.
A da bi uštedeo na benzinu, da sad sa tog noćnog posla se vrati kući, pa onda da ide na dnevni posao, on bi spavao u autu.
So he would go, they would have dinner together at night.
Večerali bi uveče zajedno.
Then he goes out,
I onda on odlazi na noćni
cleans
posao,
this other place,
čisti to mesto,
gets into the car,
seda u auto,
sleeps
odnosno
there
leže u auto,
until time to go to his daily job.
spava tamo dok ne dođe
In order
vreme
to
da ide
save,
na
because in
dnevni posao.
America distances are huge, so
Jer u
actually you
Americi-
can save quite a lot.
Razdaljine su ogromne, tako da je dosta novca uštedeo na benzinu.
And in a little, the daughters, they have two daughters, they started writing a newspaper
Imali su dve ćerke i one
and
su počeli
sending it
da
out to
pišu
friends and relatives,
novine i pošali su da šalju prijateljima i rođacima,
but they actually sold it, so they got some money for it.
ali zapravo su prodavali te novine, pa su znači
So
nešto mogli
like
da
the story of
zarade.
the widow, the whole family was involved.
I kao ona priča o udovici, čitava porodica se uključila
And in less than 5 years, they paid it all.
i za manje od 5 godina sve su otplatili.
And some of the most interesting things they say is, you know, that really brought us together as a family.
I neke od najinteresantnijih stvari koje su rekli jeste da to nas je stvarno dovelo bliže jedni
They
drugima
said,
kao
yeah,
porodica.
we ate at home and not in a restaurant.
Rekli su da, jeli smo kod kuće umjesto u restoranu,
We ate this, you know, cheap food,
jeli smo tu jeftinu hranu,
but that was the best time of day
Ali
because
to je
we were
bilo-
together. We could talk.
najbolje doba dana, zato što smo bili svi zajedno i mogli smo da razgovaramo tada zajedno.
And it's possible,
I stvarno je moguće,
but it takes commitment,
ali potrebna je posvećenost
and you can't do it without God.
i nikako bez Boga ne možemo uspjeti u tome.
So that's how you can work with it.
Dakle,
We're
tako
skipping this.
možemo izaći iz duga.
There is a lot that we could say, but we
Preskočiti,
don't have
ima
time.
puno toga što možemo reći, ali nemamo vremena.